Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Let's Talk Supernatural. Look at Steve being all psychic. So hello, Steve. Hello, Lara. So today we were going to be joined by Richard Smasoff, who was going to talk about why people go to see a medium or psychic or clairvoyant, especially in these troubled times. But unfortunately, he's not available at the moment. So Steve has very kindly dropped into the conversation. And we are still going to be talking, hopefully, about mediumship and reasons why people might go to see a medium, and really Steve's point of view in terms of how they've been used on investigations. So if you would like to ask us any questions, please do. So have you been to see a medium at all? Have you been to see a clairvoyant or a psychic? Have you been worried about employment or your health or the future in these troubled times at the moment? If so, comment on the post and we'll see your comments and we'll try and answer any questions. Or if you have any questions at all on the supernatural, do make your comments known and we will do whatever we can to answer any questions you might post to us about any supernatural subject whatsoever. Between the three of us, I think we should pretty much have it covered, perhaps apart from cryptozoology. I think we might lose out on that one, but anything else, we'll have a go. So how are you guys? Is everything all right?
All good.
Great. Yeah.
Yeah. I look a bit startled.
I know. Me too. I thought it was Richard.
Yeah, that's not Richard.
I know. I was like, Steve, it's great to see you again.
I'll answer to anything. It's fine.
Do you know what? It's good to see you anyway, Steve. And your connection sounds much better this week, doesn't it?
Yeah, fingers crossed. I don't know what. I mean, I've switched browser. I've taken the Bluetooth headsets off, so let's figure it out.
So I'm hoping that we've cleared up all the technical issues. How has everyone's week been?
It's been hectic. I tell you, I've never stopped. I think I met myself coming backwards twice on Monday, so I did. Like I said, I think you can always tell when there's a full moon. Everything seems to go a bit kind of out of control. What about you, Steve?
Just a week of homeschooling.
I know.
The mind and the brain is completely numbed by dealing with a 10-year-old and a 6-year-old who are being very
Absolutely.
Hi, Norma. Norma's asking if we're all well, and I think we are all well, keeping safe.
That's the important thing, isn't it?
Yeah, we are. Well, it's funny that the topic is this about the psychic and medium thing this week because, probably I've never been busier, really, to be honest with you. So, we're through we've got the COVID epidemic, that we're coming through. I had clients on my live last night in Leicestershire. I think they've gone back into lockdown again.
They have.
Yeah. And, when you're getting like 3,000 views, nearly 2,000 comments and stuff like that, when you're doing your lives and stuff, you realize that, in this epidemic, what would drive somebody to go and see a psychic or a medium or, in that case, because certainly demand, I can tell being the medium that demand is greater.
Yes. I mean, people must be very concerned at the moment, and obviously concerns about what they should be doing in the future about furlough and new jobs and new employment and new possibilities. So I can imagine that people are very concerned and want to have lots of questions for psychics and mediums.
Yes, I mean, they range from going really in depth and really re-navigating their life entirely to probably feeling that there's a sense of loss as well, coming because of the external circumstances, that it triggers the internal sense of loss, with things that they've experienced and, people that they've lost before as well. So it's a mixture. I can't really say it's specifically one direction, but I think I've worked it out to be the trigger being the perceived feeling of losing something.
So, Steve, you obviously have done a lot of investigations in your time. Would you say that mediums and psychics are a benefit in paranormal investigations, or do you think that sometimes they come with their own flavour, their own sort of sense of they've got a message to get across? It might not be necessarily the best one for the location.
Well, historically, of course, mediums were a rare occurrence in paranormal investigations. There are isolated instances, but it's really only until Most Haunted started, Bring Derek, onto the show, because obviously ghost hunting can be a little bit boring most of the time and not very evidential. And when you're making a television program, then you do require the services of somebody to say, you know, there's something here, there, or whatever. And you do get this sort of first idea of using psychics on every investigation. Now, that's a good thing because it gives you a different perspective. However, I have always cautioned not against using psychics, but in the way that people are dealing with psychics in an investigation. Because somebody comes along and says, hey, I have a sensitivity, or I'm psychic, and I have these extra abilities, they tend to be put onto a pedestal by a lot of the people who are attending or participating in the investigation. And rather than the word or the experiences of you or I or anybody else being documented and recorded, you tend to find that the experiences or the words of the claimed psychic, self-proclaimed psychic or sensitive, is given a greater degree of emphasis and status by the participants. Now, I've always argued that everybody's experience, regardless of whether they're a psychic, the tech expert, or whether they're somebody on their first investigation, is equally important, because they are all important experiences. You have to absolutely, as an investigator, document and record everybody's experiences. But I don't think you should give undue weight to somebody simply because they claim sensitivity. The other issue is, of course, and I've said it numerous times, is that often, this used to be the case, but it's changed in the last couple of years. Investigators were there to try and understand the case. Often we found that a psychic or a medium was there to try and promote themselves or their message. And there was many, many times where we used to see a psychic come along, and they wouldn't hijack the investigation, but they would spend a great deal of time promoting themselves at the break, saying, oh, come and see me, have a reading off me, oh, you've got a bit of a problem, but we can't deal with it here, or I can't say it here, so make an appointment and come see me. So they were there. There was often a great sort of aspect of self-promotion in what they were doing. But yes, use psychics, absolutely. That use every tool that you have in the box to try and gain an insight into an understanding of what's taking place. But just don't give it any undue emphasis just because, you know, of a claimed untestable capability.
Absolutely, yeah.
No, I totally agree with Steve. I think the role of the medium that should be there is stay in your lane, for Christ's sake, right? You're there for an actual reason, right? It's actually a very good saying, isn't it? Stay in your lane.
I love that line.
Yeah, stay in your lane. We're all there to do specific jobs, and we're all got to work together as a team, right? The actual idea is that we're a team, right? We're not like a solo entity, you know, that's there. That's the ego thing, you know, that they come from type thing. And if they're having to tout for flaming business when they're there, it's a poor show. They can't be that good a medium. That's all I'm saying.
Well, regardless of their, I mean, I've met some mediums who truly astounded me during investigations, and I've met others who've astounded me for completely different reasons because they're there with the self-promotion banner. But you know, I've never shied away from using mediums. I think they're an important part of the overall process. But I think that the way that we deal with mediums needs to be sort of redefined. You know, we have this idea that they are special, that their words carry greater weight, and you know, oh, look over, you know, the psychic said look over there, and everybody points to the camera over there. Whereas if somebody else, you know, so many groups have a resident psychic.
I think that may be because, right, there's a couple of reasons for this, right? One is which, as a medium, it was behind closed doors, wasn't it? Like 100 years ago, you were, you know, 50 years ago even, you know, you were very reluctant to come out. And I know early on in my career, Steve, right, the abuse that I would take. I have been campaigned out of places. I have had Bible bashers in there trying to get rid of me. I have had religious people blocking me from going into places, right? I have been vilified, I've been called names, I've been ridiculed, right? So it takes quite a lot of courage, right? Or it used to come out and do that. I mean, maybe now everybody and their bloody dog's coming out as a psychic now. The other thing is the term as being a medium or a psychic as a gift, right? That you're gifted doing that you've got a gifted skill, a bit like an artist, you know, who you get. Everybody can probably paint to a degree, but you get a properly gifted artist, don't you? That when they put a few strokes on a piece of paper, it actually looks like something, and it's like incredible, right? So you've got the kind of gifted ones, but again, we're down to the kind of the ego type of thing, isn't it? And the attachment of the ego, you know, to that and how they portray that. You know, I'm all for people having gifts, but generally, and even being here, we've had all sorts of people in the hotel that were in here, you know, incredibly gifted artists and stuff. And I can assure you that actually the real ones, they're very humble about it. They don't actually generally tend to, you know, be all out there and say, all right, because they're staying in their lane.
I laughed before when you were saying about being hounded and harassed by the religious, not because it was funny, but it actually happens to us too, investigators. You know, I have prepared a talk, a public presentation, and found the religious zealots outside with the banners, and you'll go to hell, and you're dealing with the dead, and it does happen. It's
absolutely, and then you get the Roman Catholic Church that actually employ exorcists.
To be honest, I actually quite like the religious zealots outside. I usually
they actually give it a little bit of a humour, don't they? But that you've got something to kind of like entertain your mind with. It's fun.
Like having Jehovah's Witnesses at the door, isn't it? If you're bored.
Oh, it is. That's it. You start foaming at the mouth, don't you? Before one of the kids has said, "Dad" or "Mum," there's somebody at the door for you. You're there. You're right there.
My wife has had to drag me away from the door on a number of occasions. And leave the poor Jehovah's Witnesses alone.
I've definitely had anything from when I've given a talk before. The minute they said I was a scientist, I was like, well, you're obviously a non-believer, so what would you know? Even before I opened my mouth. To people, yes, also saying that I am dealing with necromancy and I should be burnt at the stake because I investigate the dead, as they put it. And it's like, well, that's not really what I'm doing. I'm investigating paranormal phenomena, really. But again, it was a load of preconceptions about what I may or may not be doing and what I may or may not be thinking without even me saying a word. Which I find
when people discover there is this, particularly if it's the group psychic or because often particularly on a public investigation, you're there and invited, and there will be a psychic also invited. And there is a brick wall that the psychic is building between me and them, even though they have no idea about how I feel about psychic or mediumship. They have these I'm the investigator, therefore I must be the skeptical scientist, therefore I must be interested in debunking them or testing them or putting their claims under extra scrutiny. In reality, it's not my job to test psychics. It's not what I'm there for at all. I don't care what they make claims of. I'm only interested in their experiences. What's also interesting is there's been a change in the psychics, because now psychics have always been incredibly clever. I'm sorry, Lara, but they are incredibly good. Some of the best. They would make incredibly good psychologists because they are fantastic people readers. And they are excellent situational readers. They have an ability they steal so many great lines. You can be working with a psychic and they will say, well, of course, as Steve would agree, I like to consider all of the scientific possibilities first. And they always, quite commonly now, the psychic will proclaim themselves to be skeptical and dismissive of their abilities. They'll say, well, I have this gift, but first of all, I like to dismiss it and logically look at all of the scientific points of view. And they steal all of your lines. So you end up having to agree with the psychic, even though deep down you're saying complete rubbish. But they've pinched all your lines.
Well, Steve, I think that's quite funny, actually. I tell you what, but to steal what you said before then, right? You know, with the psychic building a wall, it is really important to keep the psychic separate to the ghost investigators. There's a couple of reasons for that. Probably one that you're talking about, like that they can profile like a mofo, right? That's what their ability is, their profiling ability, okay? This is why they're good in investigations and stuff like that. They can extract information from things that you haven't even noticed, all right? The other side of that is I'm always mindful that I don't want to have too much information about anything when I'm feeling something so that I can interpret it, right? So it's really important. That wall that you mentioned should actually be there anyway. You should actually instill that, keep them goddamn well away from you, right? For them to do their job properly and to trust the information that they're actually getting as a psychic or a medium, they have to be separate to other people.
I agree. We've always, when we've worked with mediums during investigations, we do segregate them from the majority of the situation. We send them in, you know, complete ahead of the group or behind the group, and keep them well away from the group because we don't want them to be given this pedestal, or we don't want them to be unduly influenced by the fact that we're all looking in one particular spot. Therefore, we're giving them, you know, cues and leads, and we don't want to take cues and leads from them. You're absolutely right, Lara. The two work hand in hand together, but they should work separately.
They've got to be compartmentalized, right? For you to get the full picture. Otherwise, you're just all feeding off of each other. And as a medium, I certainly couldn't work like that. I'd be too conscious of thinking, did somebody say that already? And did I remember it? You know, have I actually inadvertently profiled, right? Because part of it is getting ahead of yourself. You know, you've got the different parts of the mind. I think you'll agree that, you know, that you've really got to stay on top of yourself. You have to. As a medium, I feel that I have to. Or maybe have I been conditioned maybe over the years to feeling and being like that just because of actually when I first started out in my career, I was up against it anyway. It's not an easy profession. I felt I'm quite a sensitive person, so it was probably one of the toughest professions I could have gone into. And I probably wasn't designed for it. I've buckled a few times. I haven't like been all up there and gone, oh my God, look at me, you know, this is what I can do. I have hidden at times as well, right? So it's not as easy as what a lot of people think. And I know many mediums that, you know, you hit upon your first obstacle in that. There's a lot of good mediums I know that have literally body swerved, even reading for people, right, after that, and won't do it. Right, it's a minefield, so it is, and you've got society, you've also got social media that can dress things up to make it look something that it's not as well, and I really have a disdain for that too.
And of course, you've got the mean investigator, right? You've got, you know, this perceived notion that we're out to catch them, that we're out to trip them up, to trick them, to test them in some way, and you know,
yeah.
sometimes, I mean. It sounds like let me just throw the other side of the coin, because I have seen some horrendously bad examples of flagrant cheating by mediums, but equally, and I want to balance it by saying I've seen some terrible flagrant examples of cheating by investigators, by the materialistic scientists who will manipulate their evidence every little bit as much as the mediums will willfully, you know, score an ego point by giving away, you know, seemingly critical information after they Googled the location on their smartphone or had a sly peek at the, you know, the little leaflet that you find at some locations or a notice board. You know, both sides are equally as bad as each other. But you know, generally, I quite like working with mediums. I've always, and one of the interesting things, particularly with ghostology and outreach type, where we've had people sensitive, I have found them to be much more open and much more receptive to learning or looking at new skills, new techniques, new methods than the investigation community. Ghost investigators on the whole tend to be quite close-minded and say, well, there are no experts in the paranormal. Who are you to tell me, you know, what's right and to question my methods? I've been doing this for the last 10 years and I saw Yvette doing it before that and it works and you've got no right. Whereas people have, when we've had feedback from the Ghostology days or other outreach events, people who have come along strongly, and been openly, from the start saying, I'm sensitive, I'm psychic, I sense things, have come up at the end of the day and said, I never thought of it from the other perspective before. I never considered those possibilities. That's really changed my point of view. I found them to be much more open than the sort of general ghost hunting community.
Interestingly, Andrew point. Oh, I've got an echo. Where did that go from? There have been some groups who basically rely on those mediums, which is a little bit disappointing. And that's one of the cases that I found on an investigation where it was we had a celebrity medium, and I was going around the group saying, right, what have you picked up? What have you found? They were using various techniques of divination and other techniques, and their stock answer was, well, not very much, but the medium has said this, and the medium said there's someone called Bob up in that corner, and I said, but what are you feeling? Nothing, but there's a Bob in that corner apparently, and it was almost like they had negated any kind of own experience they might be having because they were Emperor's New Clothes, and the medium has said there was someone called Bob, and that's all they were going to focus on the entire evening was Bob. This
is where you find that what the medium or the sensitive says is the words are given greater weight, greater emphasis over and above the ordinary experience. People are quite dismissive of their ordinary, and in fact, the investigation groups will, when you read investigation reports, you'll often find long paragraphs about what the medium sensed, what the sensitive thought, what there was an old lady and her name was this and she did this and blah 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 blah, and somebody heard a sound. But that's that's it.
Sound? Where? How long before? Did it repeat?
The temperature went up, but then the medium said blah 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 blah, and we got another 3 or 4 paragraphs of what the medium said, which really isn't very helpful. It doesn't push us very far forward. You also get the mediums also seem to have an unerring ability to find ghosts where none were previously known. When I first moved to West Wales, Pembroke Castle was rarely investigated and only had 1 or 2 ghosts, and they were fairly well known. There was one in one of the towers, and there was one that frequented the castle walls, and they were incredibly, like 2 or 3 accounts. Then the local paranormal groups have quite recently got involved at the castle, and every time they go, they find another one. We're up to nearly 45 ghosts at the castle now. And each place is a different one.
Sounds like other ghosts have moved in, realizing that there's more going on in this castle than where they were.
Audience.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great, and it can be really quite frustrating from the point of view of an investigator to say, well, let's try to track back to the original sort of nub of the story, but you've got to clear through this thicket of newly created ghosts or newly discovered ghosts. It's rather like a scene from what was that recent BBC 3 comedy where the couple inherit the stately home and she can see the ghosts and he can't.
Oh, ghosts!
Ghosts. Yeah. That was it.
Ghosts. Yeah.
That sounds hilarious.
It's very funny.
Yeah, it is incredibly funny. It starts to feel a bit like that scene when they go into the cellar, which is the plague pit, and they turn the light on. And ghost hunting is
scary.
Yeah, it starts to feel like that in ghost hunting. Whereas previously you would go along to investigate the priest in the chapel at Pembroke Castle or the ghost that walks on the walls. Now you've got to sort of push your way through this massive medium detected ghosts, which have entered they've become fact because the medium said so.
For those who haven't seen Ghosts on BBC, I think it hopefully still on catch up. I'd recommend it. There's an incident where someone goes down into the basement to organise a very ancient boiler or heater, and I think the bloke goes in. He puts light on, empty dark space around him, switches off. She comes in, puts it on. There's 30 people staring at her like this kind of thing. It's like this moment she thinks, "Oh, if that was real." In the darkness, she thinks she's on her own. She puts light on. There's all these people looking at her. She switches the light off really quickly. It's very
That's funny. What it feels like here, guys.
Does it?
Yeah.
I wish I had her ability.
Oh.
Tracy has asked, has Steve ever seen an apparition?
Yes. But it's been discussed many. I don't want to bore you with the same old story. Yeah,
okay.
full. What do you call it? Full vapor, full body apparition. Yes. It was so real that I never realised until afterwards that it was an apparition of somebody who wasn't.
How did you realise afterwards? Well, what
they were dead.
I've got to tell there should have been no one else, or did you identify them as someone who was living?
Well, to tell the story, really, isn't it? But essentially, when I was in nursing, I was the nurse in charge on nights and had 3 nights off. So when I came back in, they covered the night shift with an agency nurse on my first night back in. And there really isn't much point in an agency nurse giving me a handover. So because I know the place well, so I packed her off. And then I used to start off each shift with a walk around. You'd start at the top of the building, 3-floor building, and just make sure everything was where it should be and everybody was where they should be. There was 45 people living in this nursing home. And on the first floor lived a married couple. They had adjoining rooms. I'll call them Elsie and Ernie. And it was routine to put Ernie in with Elsie so that they could have their cocoa together before bed. And if you were a bit late doing it or a bit slow, Ernie would often try and toddle down the corridor to Elsie's room next door. And as I came off the sort of 2nd floor stairs onto the 1st floor, Ernie was in the corridor with his back to me, making a break for it to Elsie's room. So he's about 10 feet away from me. I called to him and said, pop back into your room and we'll come and get the chair and we'll take you through and we'll get the cocoa. Everything was perfectly normal. He was solid. He was 3-dimensional. He was as real as everybody else was. He half turned to me and he said, I'm just going to say goodbye to Elsie. And I said, well, get back in your room. And I continued downstairs. It was a conversation that probably lasted under 10 seconds. But it was an entirely normal conversation, one that had happened on a number of other occasions, or similar on a number of other occasions. When I went down to staff room, I said to the rest of the care staff, finish up the tea, I'll do the meds. First of all, put Ernie in with Elsie. He's starting to set off down the corridor. And they looked at me like, put Ernie in with Elsie. Are you being funny? I went, no, you see these blue epaulets on the shoulder? That means I'm in charge. You put Ernie in with Elsie. Me say you jump. And he went, Ernie's dead. I went, he's not dead. He's walking up and down the corridor upstairs. Go and do it. And I thought they were playing with me. So I went into the office, flipped through the book to bring myself up to speed for pre-meds. And unfortunately, I died 2 days prior on my first night off, which I wasn't aware of. About midnight that night, we used to do every hour. You have to do make sure everybody's safe and well. And there was we used to put the building up into floors, and there was a terrible commotion on the stairs, and a lot of rushing about, and one of the care staff making for the exit with their coat on, claiming that they weren't staying in the building a moment longer because Ernie was walking the corridor and he shouldn't be because he's dead. So it was seen by 2 people, but it was completely real. There was nothing untoward about it at the time. The only thing that was untoward was what he'd said, which didn't really dawn on me till I got to the office and was sort of scratching my head saying, why did he say goodbye and not good night? But that was the only thing that was slightly different about it.
Okay. Wow.
So I suppose, Lara, if I asked you, have you ever seen an apparition, you would pretty much say all the time.
Well, it shocks the flaming pants off me when I do, honestly, when you see them fully, like, there was, when Steve was talking, you reminded me actually of when I was doing a church once down in Cumbria way, right? So it was about a 2.5 hour drive from where I stayed. And I got there and there was like 3 coach loads right, of people there. And it wasn't a very big hall. Honestly, they come from Newcastle and everywhere. I did this church fairly, you know, like regularly. The guy that ran it used to work he was a Navy guy, and he'd been retired, and, you know, he ran this church. Lovely, lovely couple, really lovely couple. The fact that she did home baking and stuff and brought it in, of course, swung it for me, you know, to go there. But so therefore, you know, you can imagine it was like this community hall, three coach loads of people from different areas in. It was heaving. The condensation was running down, you know, the walls inside. There was so, you know, much. The information, I remember it flew by. You know, there was even a message to a woman whose dad was in a coma at the time. And I was able to get this message across. And the fact that coma, when I say coma, she received the phone call when, actually, I'm going to tell you the story about Kate's mum in just a little minute, actually, as well. There's another one. I saw an apparition, and I was able to convey that to Kate afterwards. Getting back to the church, right? It was just an amazing feeling. That woman's father passed, by the way, after, you know, during the time when we were doing the demonstration. And as I meet him afterwards, quite often you'll get a queue of people that will queue, you know, to come and speak to you afterwards, right? So they would bring my sandwiches and my tea and my cake. Inevitably, I never got to eat them, even though the idea of it was really nice because I'm speaking to people. And this one woman came up to me and she said, "Thank you so much for the message that you gave." She said, "I've got some flowers for you." She said, "I've got bluebells and daffodils." She said, "What would you like?" And I said, "Oh, both, please," because I thought, I can't choose. You know, it's that, like, I can't choose. I'll have both. And she said, "Great." And she went away, right? And I mean, she was in the queue and other people saw her, right? It wasn't just me, you see. It wasn't until we got in the car that we went to drive out and I was like, "Stop the car. I forgot my flowers," right? And he said, my then husband at the time said, "What are you talking about?" And I said, my bluebells and my daffodils. And I said, "This woman came up and asked me she thanked me for the message and asked me if I wanted these flowers," right? And he said, "Lara, it's October. You don't get daffodils in October."
Unless you go to Tesco.
Sorry?
Once you go to Tesco, they have daffodils all year round.
Oh, God, daffodils in October, for Christ's sake, right? Even if you make them, right? And of course, I was like, just keep driving. Just go over like that. That was right. But the Kate has just reminded me as well that I was driving along a road in Dumfries, going out of town, Hollywood way, and I pulled in at the petrol station, right? I suddenly had this feeling to pull in from the petrol station. Got some petrol, came back out, drove onto the road, and I was about 3 cars behind. There was a kind of space. There was, you know, you pull out and there's a couple of cars that go past, and I was the third one. Anyway, drove a little bit down the road, and the next minute I was like, "Oh, wow, a car had gone on fire, right, just in front of me. It stopped, it had gone on fire, and I saw this woman stepping out from the car, right? You know, that instinct when you see something and you feel that you want to get out the car and go and help, you know, who's there. And then when I saw the woman step out, I thought, if you press him like Kate Wilson's name, because it's Kate's mum, right? It was her that was in the car, but I saw her step out from the car, so I didn't get out from the car. I thought, "Oh, thank Christ for that. She's got out." I saw her. I didn't know who it was at the time, but actually, oddly enough, Kate Wilson's mum was one of the first clients that I ever saw many years before on my, in my journey, in my profession, and my, right at the start. And further down the line, it turned out when I got back home, it was on the news, this car had gone on fire and the woman in the car had died. I actually saw her stepping out from the car. And I realized I knew the woman at the time, and then it doesn't say, you see, straight away that who the woman is, but I realized I'd worked at it, so it looked like Kate's mum, right? Because I knew her, because I remembered her, because it was the first woman that I did a reading for way back in my career. And then finding out later on it actually was Kate's mum. I was in the place of being able to speak with Kate, and be able to say to her, "I saw your mum get out the car. She's absolutely fine." I'm going all goose pimply actually even talking about this. The reaction of, and the great honour of being able to say to somebody's daughter that the mum was okay.
And still affects you.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a special moment. Steve, we want to talk about some of the places you have investigated in your time. Where would stick out for you in terms of a memorable place?
I think one of my favourites is probably either Chingle Hall, which popped up today.
I've been there. Yeah.
Somebody's talking about Chingle Hall, which we had the opportunity. We knew the owner. We got to know the owner very well, and we spent many nights and days at Chingle Hall. But I think one of my favourites has to be Dover Castle. I was fortunate enough to be on a TV production called I'm Famous and Frightened, which meant that we got to spend, I think, 4 days and 4 nights at Dover Castle with complete freedom to go anywhere we wanted. You know, there was no barriers, no restrictions on what we did, and it was just simply ghost hunting gives you some great privileges. Getting to see a lot of the history of our fantastic country, to explore some of our sort of fantastic historical monuments, to learn. I think ghost hunting is a great pursuit if you love history, and often the investigation is secondary just to the fun of being there, and just for the pleasure of being there and having the opportunity to spend time behind, off the public trail. So yeah, I mean, I think Dover Castle is absolutely up there in terms of favourite places. There are lots of places I would love to go back to because they have unanswered questions. Margam Castle, just up the road from me, or just along the Welsh coast from me, is a place that I first visited with a television crew from a notable programme that starred Yvette Fielding. From the very first, I mean, visually it's stunning. Visually, it's like walking onto the set from A Haunting. But it started to, from an investigator's point of view, the thing that I hate most are questions without answers. So there were certain things that took place off the sides of the television show that were never shown or mentioned on the television show that sufficiently intrigued me and challenged me and left me frustrated that I couldn't answer. Because it's quite near, and because I have had the opportunity to go back with other television productions for longer periods, it's trying to answer those questions have been sort of one of the main reasons for going back. Or dragging television documentary producers back into Margam. Not, because I want to know the answers. It's an opportunity to. There are lots of places that fascinate me. The big shipyard up on Merseyside that we spent so many years in. I'd love to go back because there were still unanswered questions.
You're right when you go on, Lara.
I was going to say I've been to Chingle Hall. Right, not as a medium or anything like that. I had a friend who actually worked at Chingle Hall, and of course I went to visit her, and she took me. I went to work with her. It's like, take your friend work day. It must have been anyway. So there I was, and I remember there thinking, oh my God, what an incredible energy this place actually has. And of course I remember going to the stairs and I thought, I feel like the staircase is in the wrong place. When you expect it to be in one place, it's in another. And, after a while, I mean, have you seen the size of those monk things? They were tiny. People were very small. They were like miniature. And when they said they used to hide people in there, I remember having that feeling of, like, really, I mean, how many could you get in there? Because people are so much bigger now. We tend to think of it in terms of people nowadays instead of people back then, and they were so much smaller. And I think it was an incredible place. I'm loving the sound of the place. What did you say when you said it was visually very
Margam Castle.
That sounds incredible. I would love to go there.
The hallway is stunning. Yeah.
If you go along as a public visitor, because it's open virtually all year round to the public, you can only go as far as the bottom of the stairway. Really, you can only peek in. If you go on one of the organised investigations, you get a little bit more access. But if you're there with the budget of a full television production company, you get to go a lot further. But Margam, it's just, I mean, it's visually stunning. But for me, the visuals are sort of part of the fun. But for me, it's the questions it throws up, because you can put aside the nonsense that a lot of paranormal groups, will spout when they go along and describe their time there. But when you sort of scratch beneath, there is a small number of genuine, unexplained mysteries that need an answer. And that Margam still, I can't answer the questions, and as long as that remains,
exactly, it's like an unresolved problem, isn't it?
And when I see groups going up there, week in, week out, because it's a very, very popular public ghost hunting opportunity, location, I sort of look back with rose-tinted glasses to the days when people remembered me more from the television and would invite me along to give me a chance to have another crack at it. So,
that's a picture of the entrance hall. It's a very dramatic picture, admittedly.
Oh my God, that's incredible.
It is awe-inspiring. It's awe-inspiring from the outside too. It just looks like, in fact, it's been used by Doctor Who. It's been used by what was that other television program? The Da Vinci
Code, was it?
No. They turned the inside of Margam. I can't remember what it's called now. But anyway, they turned the inside of Margam. It's a funny story, actually, because we chose Margam because it was derelict. It had suffered a fire, and so inside it's the ground floor, which has been partially restored, has been done up like a medieval castle. In reality, the building is only a 19th century building on the site of an earlier. So you've got this mock medieval ground floor, and then this bare brick upper floor as a result of the fire. So it's been left largely unrestored, which is why we chose it, because it satisfied the particular requirement. There she is. I see that every time I drive along the M4. It's an hour and 10 minutes from home. And we chose it because they wanted a particular look. The director wanted a particular look, and we had designed the experiments that we were going to be working with, demonstrating around this abandoned bare brick interior. Only to Da Vinci's Demons was the series. Only to encounter the inside of it that looked like the 14th, 15th century Venetian Doge's palace, with pillars and lavish statuary and balconies and all manner of stuff. So authentic that one of our investigators leaned against a solid stone column and then knocked it over because it was polystyrene. But it was completely and utterly disorientating, because the set designers for Da Vinci's Demons had done such a fantastic job that we would go up the stairs and, where am I? Is this wing, or is that through that door, or we just didn't recognise the inside of the building. It was incredibly disorientating. There was another occasion we were at Margam, and they used it for filming. Do you remember the episode with the angels? Don't Look, and Doctor Who with the angels.
No.
There was a famous episode where they have the angels, and if you looked away, they would jump a bit closer to you, and eventually.
Oh.
Yeah, very scary episode.
I used to hide behind the sofa at Doctor Who when I was younger.
Episodes up at Margam, and they were due to be filming the day after we completed, and so the TARDIS arrives. Now the BBC, we never realised. We just thought, oh, it'll just turn up on a truck and they'll hoof it out the back. We knew it was coming because the staff from Margam knew it was coming, because filming was due to commence. But the BBC they're incredibly secretive about the TARDIS. It's kind of a pun or a game that they play, because this plain dark grey coloured side loader truck turns up, completely unannounced, and then the TARDIS appears and the truck goes away. They don't ever tell anybody when they're bringing it or when they're shipping it out.
Oh.
So they sort of mysteriously appear. So we'd gone inside to do some filming, and we came outside for a fag and a coffee break, and the TARDIS was there. It's awesome because all we then did for the next hour was all standing around getting photos in front of the TARDIS.
Oh wow! Did you go in the TARDIS?
No. It's just a box. Oh, that's the one. It's just a box. That
Wow.
Yeah, but it's Margam is it's incredibly fun at Margam because you go along there and it's just off the side of the M4, overlooks Port Talbot's, the giant industrial complex, the steelworks of Port Talbot, and you go into this sort of through the gates and through the driveway, this long driveway through a country park, and they have a population of deer, and often, because it's low-lying near the coast, you'll get these sort of rolling thick sea mists coming in. So we finished at Margam one night, and it's about 2-3 in the morning, pitch black. There's no point in putting the car headlights on because they're only, they're just bouncing off the mist in front of the car, and you can probably see, you're navigating by kind of like, well, I remember the road run a little bit that way, then went a little bit to the left or the right. Then all of a sudden, out this mist, this giant white figure loomed. It was a spoon from the passenger seat where I was driving, and they have a white deer, a white stag, and as part of the herd there, and this thing just loomed out of the mist and frightened the bejesus out of the passenger.
Oh my God.
Lots of fond memories in Margam because it's so close. To visit, but investigation-wise, I don't think I've been for a couple of years. I was
going to say that the opportunity to go and investigate these places is one of the main reasons I do this. So I remember I was lucky enough to do an investigation at Portsmouth Dockyard. And we were in the attic space of Storehouse 9, which basically overlooks HMS Victory and has been there before the ship was built. And in this attic space, not only do you look out the window and see HMS Victory, but in that space is a whole load of, I almost use the word memorabilia, but that's completely the wrong word, collection of objects of naval artifacts. So they've got the footplate of the Bismarck, and they've got the ship's bell of HMS Ark Royal. Now that's the first Ark Royal, which is older than the Mary Rose, and it's just this bell. You could bing it. I did. I'm going to get into trouble for saying I did that now. But the weight of history of up there was just overwhelming. I was in tears because it was just an opportunity to go in where you had hundreds of years of naval history just in this amazing attic space. It's really long and it's got all these beams. It's really dramatic. So, I mean, there are times you just get overwhelmed by the sense of heritage in the locations, and you get to see behind the scenes, which is just so exciting. You go, you go to magnificent locations, you've got the little ropes up that you can't go beyond. And when you hire places to do investigations, you get this opportunity to step beyond that barrier and go behind the panels and down the secret passages and into the cellars and up into the attics. It's always really exciting opportunity. And I think a lot of people who come with me go parallel investigating is that opportunity to be in these amazing locations after dark. And if you get activity as well, that's like an extra bonus. But sometimes it's just being soaked up in history.
Do you sometimes find, Jonathan, that the ghost hunting becomes almost secondary because you get totally absorbed by the history, and somebody will come up and, oh, somebody's seen it. Yeah, well, I'm looking at this at the moment. Have you seen this really cool? This was on.
Yes, there's 3 opportunities that this has happened. Once, if you go to Mitchell Priory, which ironically I was at the weekend, on a lovely summer's evening, where of course it's not going to get dark until about 10 o'clock, and you've got these beautiful grounds, you've got these Canadian geese with all their ducklings going off to bed. It's a moated property. It's so beautiful. The last thing you think about doing is ghost hunting. You just want a picnic and just sit and watch the sun go down. It's beautiful. Then there was another opportunity where we were at Fort Widley, and the goats that graze there broke out, and we went goat hunting because they also hang around the moat. So you're more worried about to see these demonic eyes after dark.
Exactly that situation. We went ghost hunting too.
It's a lot of fun actually because they're so friendly. They are so friendly. They are just curious as to what you're doing. And the final opportunity was Fort Horsted, I think it is, over sort of Chatham direction, Kent. And we went into this one area where we were then warned that there were cave spiders, and it was then a spider hunt. We were there for we got into these different areas. We were in this one area for an hour. And honestly, God, the only thing we picked up in an hour-long investigation was where the spiders were. It was all we were focusing on. No one wanted to put their lights off, and the spiders were going to drop on us. So it was just like the spider there. We're not putting our lights off. We're not moving because there's one there. It might jump on us. So occasionally the building takes over the investigation as what might be there, as opposed to the spirit. I think
when you're doing an investigation, most of the time, I'm a strong advocate of the best way to investigate a location is simply to be there.
Yeah.
Rather than just wander around, or we're going to room A or room B or the bedroom or the ballroom, or we're going to do that. We're going to push a table round. We're going to do the Ouija board. We're going to sit around the Frank's box. Just be there, because if something's going to happen, then it will happen regardless. And you've got to try and stay awake. You've got to try and stay alert. And what better way than to, engross yourself in the history or exploring the location? It keeps you alert. If the paranormal is going to happen, it's going to happen anyway.
I mean, the number of times that things might have tailed off, got a bit quiet, and then we start talking about other things. We have just a general chit chat about other experiences, or even completely random subject matters. And activity seems to pick up again. It's like sometimes it's like, hello, we're still here. We're still waiting.
Well, I mean, returning to the previous subject in mediumship, this was one of the things, the great things that the spiritualist advocated strongly, was this requirement to keep the energy, or to build the energy, keep the energy. They would engage in prayers and singing popular sort of musical songs of the day prior to the seance, or prior to the platform reading. And I think I was only reading about Helen Duncan the other week from down your neck of the woods, John. And what was her favourite song? She started south of the border, down Mexico way. And she started. You wouldn't think of a modern psychic isn't going to start off with a Beyonce song, are they? Or maybe. Like, if you're going to do if you're running a seance next week, let's start it off with an Ed Sheeran number.
Absolutely. Actually, I'm up for that. I think that'd be hilarious.
Yes, Lara, I want to see you now do put a ring on it routine before you start.
If you love it, you put a ring on it. Yeah, that's right. Do the actions and everything. Yeah, but then, well, if you go to churches, they sing. Why do you think they do that? Right, it's to lift the vibration, right? So, because they're doing healing, they're doing all sorts in there, but the singing. So, like you're saying, why can't we do it as seance? Let's get Beyonce going.
I do know several paranormal groups that get really loud and active and do a lot of singing just to get a lot of energy going. Yeah. So yeah, sometimes I think, what the hell are they doing? Because there's a lot of jumping around and
you don't
get that energy.
Do you? No.
I unfortunately lack the imagination, which has got me into trouble on a number of occasions, because you know how psychics will often start off with a protection circle, or everybody sort of gathers in a circle, and then the group's resident psychic will lead them in a protection ritual of some sort, which usually involves them imagining themselves bathed in blue light or different coloured light. Well, there was one occasion, funnily enough, it was at Margam, which might be why I haven't been asked back. The group was bathing themselves, had to imagine themselves bathed in blue light, and I'd got myself out of the idea of standing in the circle. I said, I want to, but you've got to join in. Everybody's got to be protected. So the medium had them sort of, going through these mental gymnastics in their head and bathing themselves in blue light. I had in my bag an ultraviolet torch, so I just. Look, I've got no imagination, so I'm going to bathe myself in blue light. What's wrong with that?
Right, that's it. She said blue light.
Although, yeah, sometimes the practical side gets you into trouble. Again, a most haunted story for you. Nearly got me, caused a huge fight actually on Lives. Portsmouth Live, to be precise, down in the Marine Museum, when they left myself and Ian Shalato, and several of the other crew on a webcam doing a seance. And I was wearing a leather jacket. And every time I moved, the leather creaked. And Ian had kept us in lockdown in this room for the best part of an hour in the attic. And the temperature was up into the 90s. Everybody was melting. We couldn't get we were begging on the radio for water to be sent up, but Ian wouldn't allow anybody up the stairs to bring us water. So we all get increasingly frustrated. And eventually I had to move to reposition one of the pieces of equipment. And Ian said to me that my creaking leather jacket was the reason that nothing had happened is my creaking leather jacket was being disrespectful to spirits. An argument ensued.
I bet.
On the webcam. Yeah. Sorry.
Wow.
I know the attic space very well at the Royal Marines Museum. I organised that space for them. And it is unbearably cold in the winter and unbearably hot in the winter. So in the summer, so I can imagine it would have been horrendous up there. There's no air movement at all.
7 or 8 of us in there with this, with the cameras running and the heat that was being generated, and it had been into the high 70s most of the day. So it's lovely and warm.
I get over the leather jacket being disrespectful to spirits.
That's what he said. Which it didn't take. By this point, when you reach this sort of point, you're dehydrated, you're hot, you're bothered, you can't see the purpose of what we're doing. The medium is out to make it. It's his starring role on Most Haunted Live. He's got all the attention's on him, and the investigator's got a creaky jacket and he's angry and wants a drink. Makes some great television sometimes.
In his defence, it was a 3-day shoot, and I can't remember if it was the first or second day. He was buried in Southsea Castle moat.
He was buried on the second. Do you know?
So he might have been a bit grumpy from that.
Oh. No, he loved that. So do you know what? That nearly went very, very badly wrong.
Oh.
Very badly wrong. I don't know if Jonathan's aware, but certainly I don't think many of the viewers were ever aware. The coffin, the double-sized coffin that Ian and Carl were to be buried in at Southsea, was it was strongly constructed, but it had a weight limit for the lid. And to get around the weight limit, what they'd done is they'd substituted most of the soil that they were backfilling with cat litter and fuller's earth, which weighs considerably less than good old Southsea soil. It then rained solidly for the whole of the day. Cat litter and fuller's earth is fantastic at absorbing water. So when they backfilled, buried the coffin with Carl and Ian in it, the weight on the lid was well over what it was safe. And there was a broadcast link into the coffin.
Mm-hmm.
And it went the coffin lid started to give almost immediately. They cut the feed to the coffin, at which point Carl actually said, put it back on again, because if I'm going to die, I want to die on camera. Whilst they were there was an excavator frantically trying to get them back out again, to try and get this horrendous weight off the coffin. The coffin survived and was actually, I think, was then ended up in Carl and Yvette's garden.
Oh God!
Several several people were subsequently buried in it for short periods of time as part of the entertainment whenever you visited Carl and Yvette's. But
I strange enough, because I was sorting out the location for them, I got the phone call from the production company. They said, we'd like to bury Ian. Do you think Southsea Castle will let us? So I was like, I'll ask.
Yeah. And
I do remember that afterwards there was a lot of issues from English Heritage about permissions of, as it turned out, it was 1960s backfill rubbish that was actually in the moat, but still it was needed verification of English Heritage digging holes.
The whole premise was the ground was dry and had a certain weight.
Yeah.
And then that particular day,
rained.
the second day, it rained solidly for most of the day, and of course everything was saturated. But that never occurred to people that this lightweight earth that they were using was so highly absorbent.
And all that happens live, and no one has a clue what's going on in the background to sort out potential dramas and issues.
And there was various sort of off-camera discussions about who was going to be spending, lone vigils in different parts of Southsea Castle, and there was issues over coins being thrown about on the final night. Lots of things that never ever made it to front of house.
Oh wow! What, they really were thrown about?
Oh yeah,
like spiritually thrown about.
Oh.
Oh right! Oh, for Christ's sake! I was nearly there.
No, and then I was asked to supply a list of paranormal phenomena that occurred at every single location. So I might have made a few up as well.
Yeah. Well, one of the best
happened.
One of the best parts about that was visiting Wimmering for the first time, because I'd heard a great deal about it. And if you started off your tour of Wimmering Manor from the inside, it's a fantastic place. It's when you step outside and you realise it's actually in the middle of a housing estate. You have to do this sort of mental flip around when you first arrive, because you drive through this estate and you think, well, what am I doing here? It's like there's a 1970s housing estate, and then there's this Wimmering.
That's incredible. Yeah.
If you did it the other way around, but it's fantastic stuff, fantastic location. I didn't get to do the investigation. I was locked down in the studio that first night. Kieran was out there for the first night. Then they realised that they should actually have the investigator out there and the psychologist on the couch.
Yeah.
But we did a location scout during the daytime, so I spent quite a lot of time during the first day, the day before the shoot, up at Wimmering. Superb place. Love to get back there.
Wow.
I'm a key holder, so anytime you want me.
One day, out of lockdown, maybe.
Right, we're over our hour, so we chat away. We forget that people are watching.
Yeah.
So Steve, thank you so much for coming on and stepping in for Richard. I do hope Richard's all right.
Amazing. Certainly enjoyed it. Incredible week, I think, this week.
Well, it was a break for me. It was a welcome break from homeschooling. So.
Oh, yes.
I to talk to some adults.
They're homeschooling you or the other way around?
Yeah, no, it's really refreshing to have somebody to talk to who's not, sort of 10-year-old and.
So fantastic. Do have a good week, everyone. And hopefully we will be back next week and we'll schedule what we're going to be talking about then.
So we've got our Twitter, for those of you that are on Twitter, we're on Supernatural Mag there. And next week we've got Richard Freeman on the track of the Almasty. It's about cryptoology.
Oh, right. That sounds intense. So have a good week, everyone. And we'll see you all next week. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thanks for showing up. Bye. Bye.
Where's my hands go?